I wonder why it is that so many hypnotists, hypnotherapists and NLP practitioners insist on referring to hypnosis as being a trance. I suppose that many of the well-known NLP and hypnosis trainers call it trance, and therefore their students and graduates learn to refer to it as that too. Plus they get to use some hilarious and clever wordplay by referring to transformation and take a trance on me. Whimsical stuff like that. When you look at actual definitions for the word trance, it tends to state things along the lines of any. It being your trance as being any mental state in which the person is unaware or apparently unaware of the environment, or characterized by loss of voluntary movement, rigidity, and lack of sensitivity to external stimuli. It does also offer up, dictionary definitions do offer up other variations to do with things like being stunned or dazed, or a state of kind of mystical absorption, and also pertains to spiritualism, where one has temporarily lost consciousness and can be controlled by a greater intelligence. Then, of course, the reference to trance music. Yay! Anyway, on this, on a page over at Wikipedia, the term trance is referred to as denoting a variety of processes: ecstasy, techniques, modalities, states of mind, awareness, and consciousness. And trance states may occur involuntarily and unbidden. So it's my belief, and as a result of my own experience and reading of the research, also supported with a lot of evidence, that it's vitally important for anyone about to experience hypnotherapy to have any misconceptions ironed out, and that they're overcome and set straight, especially if they've picked up snippets of information from the media, for example. Many people still believe that hypnosis is something which is done to them, shazammed, rather than something that they do to themselves or that they do collaboratively. They think that being hypnotized renders them under the control of the hypnotist, that they will have some kind of monumentally large altered state. They may even fear being unable to come out of that state, and also that they won't be able to remember any of it. So these and some similar myths tend to get perpetuated rather boringly, as far as I'm concerned, all over the place. Controlled research in hypnosis has since led to a more accurate understanding of hypnotic phenomena, and I've discussed this in depth in other videos, and that's not really the central focus here today. I think an accurate account of hypnosis should be explained to someone before embarking in hypnotherapy, and before hypnosis is employed in any way. The idea that hypnosis involves or is even the same as a trance state is potentially one of the most destructive and harmful misconceptions about hypnosis, according to a number of authors that I'm going to mention here today. So let me start by saying that decades of research have pretty much failed to confirm any theory that people that are positively responding to suggestions are actually or is actually anything to do with them being in an altered state of some kind. As such, the vast majority of researchers, scholars, authors, good quality trainers have sort of abandoned that idea. If you refer to the work of Kirsch and Lin in the 90s, you can get a much more accurate summary of this. And if you refer to some of my previous videos and some of my blog articles and things, you'll get a much better look. You can look at the paper by Kirsch and Lin, The Altered State of Hypnosis, for example. Most of these, a lot of people tend to reject the term trance due to it being misleading, or at the very best, any who use it refer to it in the same way that you'd refer to being absorbed in a television program or when daydreaming. Yet amongst hypnosis practitioners and hypnotherapists, and I think especially NLP practitioners and those with an Ericksonian leaning, it's very much used, it's very popular. There are many who believe that relating hypnosis to a trance state could actually inhibit the success of hypnosis and hypnotherapy interventions. And I encounter many people who have no previous experience of hypnosis that are afraid of the notion of going into a trance state. Lots of hypnotherapists or hypnotists may thrive on that notion, but I don't want fear in my hypnotherapy consulting rooms for sure. I'm part of my job and my purpose is to help people shed that stuff. Many people fear a loss of control that this sort of idea of trance instills, I think. On a practical note, if people do fear the hypnotist or hypnotherapist, they may subsequently resist or reject suggestions that are being given, and basic levels of rapport and the working alliance may be very, very difficult to establish. My big issue with this notion, though, is not that I get fed up with hypnotists kind of loving this self-centered notion of being, like this sort of awe-inspiring, fear-inducing, all-powerful being who wields hypnosis in this way. But that when they enforce this idea, the client or the patient ends up believing that they only have a passive role to play within hypnotherapy. And as a result, they sit back, or they think they're going to sit back and get zapped. All the good stuff happens to them while they are in this trance state. And they wake up and exclaim, hallelujah, and all is better. And I think this raises a lot of question marks, and quite rightly so. In hypnotherapy, the hypnotherapist getting the results tend to be those that have a collaborative approach, an approach where therapist and client work together, both knowing their roles and understanding their responsibilities. And those roles are equal in number for both client and the therapist. When you educate the hypnotherapy client properly and inform them that hypnosis is perhaps not a trance state, they can relax and be involved in the process and learn that such involvement is evidence of the hypnosis being successful. And this takes a lot of pressure away from the client. It enables them to be much more responsive to suggestions given that that are given by the therapist. Let me support this, though, a bit more. In 2002, in a paper entitled The Effects of an Induction and Defining Hypnosis as a Trance versus Cooperation, Hypnotic Suggestibility and Performance Standards, that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Hypnosis by Lynn Vanderhoff, Schindler and Stafford, and they discovered that participants who were told that responding to hypnosis meant they had to enter a trance were less suggestible than the participants who were told that responding to hypnosis required them to be actively involved in the process. This is damning. This is damning evidence. I mean, really, do I need to say more? Is there much more that I need to say in this particular video with regard to using the word trance? The word trance was never really used by the founders of hypnotism, Braid and Bernheim in particular. Certainly they didn't use it to explain how hypnosis works. It wouldn't have made sense to them. In Victorian medicine, trance was used synonymously with coma. It implies a state of being half dead, in transit, to the afterlife. Neither Braid nor Bernheim would have accepted that their subjects necessarily entered a half-dead state in order to respond to suggestions, of course. The word also always has carried supernatural connotations, and typically, I'm keen to move away from that. Sociocognitive theories of hypnosis replace this concept of a trance or an altered state of consciousness with the notion of a cognitive set that I speak about in other videos. Clients aren't usually familiar with the word cognition, so I tend to use the more common term mindset, which tends to mean the same thing. Hypnosis becomes primarily a mindset, a set of attitudes including motivation, expectation, trust, and so on, rather than an altered or abnormal state of consciousness. Go look at my other videos for explanations on that. Braid did write a book entitled Observations on Trance or Human Hibernation in 1850. However, as this book makes clear, in the Victorian era, the word trance was used to describe a disease, or rather a medical symptom. As I said earlier, it's synonymous with catalepsy or coma, and which Braid compared to the state of animal hibernation. And Braid reserves the word trance for a very small minority of hypnotic clients who enter a state superficially resembling a coma. He was certainly talking about less than 10% and probably less than 1% of his subjects. So the word trance at that time carried this connotation of being half dead, as I said earlier, or on the verge of passing over to death. Etymologically, the English word trance comes via Old French from the Latin verb transiere, meaning to pass across to the other side of death or simply to die. Hence the association with the state of coma. More recently, in the 1970s, the prominent researchers Sabin and co. Observed that the earlier forms of the word trance, trans, were used, again to convey this meaning of a passage from life to death, and was used as a metaphor to denote this kind of intermediate condition between waking and sleep. And thus, the term was employed to represent the total or partial immobility that sometimes characterizes people who suspend all actions under conditions of dread or of doubt and uncertainty. Over time, the kind of somewhat sensational word trance became used more and more widely by hypnotists until it was taken by Milton Erickson, for example, to refer to the experiences of almost every hypnotic subject. And so this concept of this sort of naturalistic or everyday trance was introduced, watering down the term to the extent that it went from referring to exceptionally rare comatose subjects to the experience of daydreaming or being engrossed in a newspaper story or a film and so on. However, as far as I'm aware, Hippolyte Bernheim, the founder of the Nancy School of Hypnotherapy, and probably, in my opinion at least, the second most important person in 19th century hypnotism after Braid, he did not use the term hypnotic trance either, not at all. Indeed, Alan Gould, the historian and the author of A History of Hypnotism, mentions the same thing. He said, and he stated as saying, curiously enough, the term trance, which has such a popular vogue today, was somewhat rarely used, being most often adopted by mid-19th century English and American writers. You can check that quote in his book. Although hypnotherapists frequently refer to everyday states of reverie, for example, as trance, most ordinary people do not, and find this terminology confusing and possibly rather misleading. It adds a sort of veneer of the supernatural to hypnotherapy, which potentially makes it seem more dramatic. But perhaps helping make it popular with stage hypnotists, but also creates fear, confusion, and opposition amongst many people. The earlier cited research shows that referring to trance reduces suggestibility, which is not good for us in hypnotherapy. It also alienates hypnotherapists who use this terminology from other branches of psychological therapy, which do not. So, for example, most hypnotherapists would concede that the majority of cases, in the majority of cases, the use of concentration, mental imagery, positive suggestions, relaxation, and so on. In CBT, kind of resembles techniques of hypnotherapy, and research consistently shows that it achieves very similar results. However, CBT practitioners will be utterly baffled by the claim that their clients are in a state of hypnotic trance, that everything is trance. The same applies to many humanistic and other therapies which use guided imagery, positive thinking, relaxation, and so on, in ways which are not only similar to, but often historically derived from early hypnotherapy. Another problem with the word trance is that it implies to the minds of many novice hypnotists that a single causal factor, depth of trance, accounts for most of the effects of hypnotic suggestion. And this is almost certainly completely false and the cause of much confusion in practice. A multitude of ordinary psychological factors have been shown to contribute to the responses of hypnotic subjects, such as the working alliance between therapist and client. Clients' personality traits, the wording of suggestions, delivery of techniques, level of motivation of the client's cognitions, the client's beliefs, expectations, and so on and so on. I could go on. Hypnotherapists should be working with all of these factors in parallel in order to optimize their results, not just apportioning response to a depth of trance. So, hence, when novice hypnotherapists say, I tried to hypnotize someone, but my suggestions didn't work. I need to try to get them deeper into trance next time. As they often do, I think they're probably chasing a red herring. So how about it, folks? How about we stop referring to hypnosis as trance, as a trance? Go on, you can do it. So do subscribe to this channel. Go visit my college website. My thank you for watching. Goodbye for now. Here's the rest of my t-shirt for those of you that are interested.